My name is Natalie Turner. I'm 31 years old, and the last time my father looked me in the eye, I was 17 holding a backpack while he told me I was no longer his daughter. 14 years later, he sat across from me at my wealthy uncle's will reading, smiling as if the fortune already belonged to him. He didn't apologize or ask how I had survived after being thrown out. He adjusted his watch, leaned toward his wife, and whispered, "Once the properties transfer, we'll finally be free of Alan's debts." He didn't realize I heard him. The attorney entered carrying 2 sealed folders. My father immediately demanded that she begin with the real estate portfolio, when she asked everyone to remain silent. He laughed. "There's no mystery. My brother always knew blood came first." I finally spoke. "Be careful using the word blood. The last time you used it, you said mine wasn't worth protecting." His smile vanished. His wife stared at the table and their son stopped tapping his phone. The attorney looked at me with an expression that was part concern, part warning. Then she opened the first folder and read a sentence that made my father jump to his feet. But the inheritance was only the beginning. My uncle had left behind documents, recordings, and one final condition designed to expose why my family had abandoned me 14 years earlier. Before I tell you what my father said, and what happened when the second folder was opened, tell me, what time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? I'd love to see how far Natalie's story has traveled, to understand why that room felt more like a trial than a will reading. You need to know what happened in 2010. I was 17, living in a house where love was measured by how useful you were to my older brother, Alan. My parents, David and Laura, treated his smallest achievements like historic events. When he passed his driving test on the 3rd attempt, they ordered a cake. When I won a statewide art competition, my mother asked me to move the certificate because it blocked the family calendar. Alan was not especially cruel when we were children. He simply learned that consequences never applied to him. If he broke something, I distracted him. If he failed a class, the teacher was unfair. If I succeeded, I was lucky or selfish for making him feel inadequate. By 17, I had stopped showing my parents most of my artwork. I painted late at night in a storage room behind the garage using discarded plywood when I couldn't afford canvas. My art teacher, Mrs. Green, discovered what I was doing and helped me prepare a portfolio for the Sterling Institute of Art and Design in New York. I applied without telling my family because I already knew what they would say. Art was childish. New York was expensive. Alan needed support, and my future could wait. The acceptance package arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Sterling had not only accepted me, the school offered a full scholarship covering tuition, housing, supplies, and a small living allowance. I read the letter 5 times before believing it. For one reckless moment, I imagined my father saying he was proud. I carried the envelope into the kitchen where my parents sat with Alan and a man I had never met. Papers covered the table. "I got into Sterling," I said. "They gave me a full scholarship." The stranger looked impressed. My mother skimmed the letter and placed it beneath several bank documents. Alan asked whether the scholarship could be converted into cash. I laughed because I thought he was joking. No one else did. The stranger was a private lender. Alan had failed to qualify for the business program he wanted, but a for-profit college in Florida would admit him if our parents paid a large deposit. They had already borrowed against the house to cover his failed restaurant venture and a car he had totaled without insurance. The lender was offering another loan at a brutal interest rate. My mother explained that if I declined Sterling and stayed home, they could stop paying for my food, transportation, and community college tuition. That savings could go to Alan. Then my father revealed a worse plan. He wanted me to sign a declaration saying I had no intention of attending college, so he could withdraw money from an education account my grandmother had created for me. I stared at him. You want me to give up a full scholarship so you can pay for Alan's third attempt at college? My father's jaw tightened. Your brother is trying to build something practical. You want to paint pictures. Alan leaned back and smiled. Don't be dramatic. Nat, you can paint anywhere. My mother used the sentence she always used when they wanted something from me. Families make sacrifices. I asked what Alan had ever sacrificed for me. The room fell silent. My father ordered the lender to leave, once the door closed. He pulled my scholarship letter from beneath the papers and tore it in half. He didn't know I had photographed every page. You will call that school tomorrow and decline, he said. Then you will sign the release. I told him no. The argument lasted nearly 2 hours. My mother accused me of resenting Alan's confidence. Alan said teachers had made me arrogant. My father said the scholarship had poisoned me. Then I noticed a document bearing my name. It was a withdrawal request from my education account. The signature looked like mine, but I had never signed it. My father had forged my name. Until then. I believed my parents simply valued Alan more. Now I knew they were willing to commit fraud for him. I grabbed the document and said I would show it to my school counselor. My father crossed the kitchen and ripped it from my hand. You will not destroy this family over a technicality, I answered. You're destroying it yourself. His expression changed. He was no longer looking at his daughter. He was looking at a witness who knew too much. My father told me to pack. I thought he was bluffing until he followed me upstairs carrying 2 trash bags and began throwing my clothes into them. My mother stood in the doorway crying softly, but did nothing. Alan remained downstairs turning up the television while my life was dismantled above him. Where am I supposed to go? I asked. My father said selfish people eventually learn to take care of themselves. I reminded him I was 17. He replied that if I was old enough to betray my family, I was old enough to survive without one. I refused to leave without my portfolio. The storage room behind the garage contained 3 years of paintings, sketchbooks, recommendation letters, and the photographs I had submitted to Sterling. When I tried to reach the back door, my father blocked me. He said everything under his roof belonged to him. I pushed past him and ran outside. The storage room lock had been changed. Through the window, I could see my canvases stacked against the wall. My father threw my backpack and 1 trash bag onto the driveway. The second bag split open, scattering clothes across the wet pavement. It had started raining. But no one helped me. Alan appeared behind the glass door, holding the torn pieces of my scholarship letter. He pressed them against the window with a grin, then let them fall. I told myself they would call me back before I reached the end of the block. They didn't. I told myself my mother would come after me once my father calmed down. She didn't. I walked 3 miles before sheltering beneath the awning of a closed pharmacy. My phone had 12% battery. I called Mrs. Green. She arrived with food, photographed the bruises on my wrist, and asked whether there was one adult in the family I trusted. The only name I could think of was Uncle Jack, my father's younger brother. I remembered him as the relative who sent me art books instead of dolls, and once reminded my father that Alan was not the only child in the room. My parents called him arrogant and manipulative, but I had not seen him in years. Mrs. Green found his business number and left a message. He called back 11 minutes later. When she explained what happened, he didn't ask whether I had misbehaved. He asked, "Is Natalie safe?" By morning, Uncle Jack had arranged a flight to Miami, hired a local attorney to protect my education account, and booked a hotel room so I would not spend the night in a car. My mother finally called at 7. Her first question was not whether I was safe. She wanted to know where the forged form was. I told her I had photographed it. She said I was humiliating my father and jeopardizing Alan's future. Then she offered a bargain. I could return if I surrendered my phone, decline the scholarship, and signed whatever documents my father gave me. "We can forget this happened," she said. I asked whether Dad regretted throwing me out. She paused, then said, "Don't force us to choose between you and your brother." I replied, "You already did." It was the last conversation we had for 14 years. Uncle Jack arrived that afternoon wearing a wrinkled suit and looking angrier than any adult had ever looked on my behalf. He crouched so we were eye level and asked whether I wanted to go back. I said no, though part of me still feared that made me disloyal. He nodded. "Then you're coming with me, and nobody gets to punish you for protecting your future." Before we left, his attorney documented the forged signature, the locked studio, the scholarship, the threats, and my mother's call. My father sent one final text. "The minute you board that plane, you are no longer my daughter." I stared at it until the words blurred. Jack copied the message for the attorney and said, "One day, he will understand exactly what that sentence cost him." Living with Uncle Jack did not heal me instantly. His house was beautiful, but for months I slept with my backpack beside the bed because I expected to be expelled after every mistake. I apologized for eating food, using electricity, and leaving a cup in the sink. When he bought me art supplies, I promised to repay him. He never mocked those habits. He gave me a key, opened a checking account in my name, and wrote a simple household agreement. I had chores, a curfew, privacy, and one rule: no gift could later become a debt. "Support isn't a weapon," he told me. "Love is not a loan someone can demand back when you disobey." With legal help, we protected my scholarship and education account. My father tried to claim I was unstable and had been manipulated by Jack, but the argument collapsed when the forged document was examined. To avoid a criminal investigation, my parents relinquished control of the account and promised not to contact Sterling. Jack let me decide whether to press charges. I chose not to as long as the money was protected. Years later, I realized my father interpreted mercy as weakness. I moved to New York for school, but Miami became home. Jack called every Sunday evening and attended my exhibitions whenever he could. He did not praise every painting. He told me the truth without making me feel disposable. During my second year, I created a series called Negative Space based on the empty places people leave inside families. One piece showed 4 figures at a dinner table, but the youngest had been cut from the canvas. The missing silhouette drew more attention than everyone else. A gallery purchased the series. When I called Jack, he asked, "Are you proud of it?" I realized I had never considered whether my own opinion mattered. Success came slowly. I worked in galleries, painted murals, taught weekend classes, and accepted commercial projects so I could fund the work I loved. Jack invested in my first studio only after I presented a business plan. I repaid him early, and he framed the final payment receipt beside my first exhibition poster. By 27, I was running an arts foundation that provided supplies and legal support to teenagers whose families misused money intended for their education. We called it Open Door. I rarely told anyone it had been inspired by a locked storage room and a torn scholarship letter. My family occasionally resurfaced. A cousin said my mother missed me. Another relative asked whether success had made forgiveness easier. Alan sent 3 emails. One requested an introduction to Jack's investors. Another asked for a temporary loan. The third accused me of turning Jack against the family. None contained an apology. I never responded. Still, their absence lived inside my work. I repeatedly painted the same house. A perfect exterior with one room sealed behind brick. Jack encouraged therapy instead of revenge. "Anger can protect you," he said. "But if you build your whole life around proving them wrong, they still control the architecture." Jack eventually told me the truth about his history with my father. They inherited a small construction company from their parents. Jack expanded it while my father withdrew money to fund risky projects and cover Alan's mistakes. Years before, I was thrown out. My father forged Jack's approval on a loan application. Jack snorts, paid the debt to protect their employees, and forced him out of the company. My parents later told relatives that Jack had stolen the business. In reality, he had saved it. Despite their estrangement, Jack quietly helped my parents more than once. He paid overdue property taxes through an attorney, covered part of my grandmother's medical care, and settled a debt tied to Alan's first restaurant so employees would receive their wages. He never told them, but he kept records of everything because he knew my father would rewrite the past whenever money was involved. When I was 29, Jack was diagnosed with an aggressive heart condition. Treatment helped, but it changed our sense of time. He asked whether I trusted anyone enough to share a life, and whether I still woke expecting to be expelled from places I loved. I asked why he had never married. He said he had confused independence with safety. "Your father taught you closeness is dangerous," he warned. "Don't let that become his final inheritance." 6 months before Jack died, my father sent him a letter. David wrote that enough time had passed and that the brothers should repair their relationship. The letter mentioned forgiveness, but also contained detailed questions about Jack's properties, trusts, and succession plans. Jack handed it to me. "What do you see?" he asked. I said, "I saw a man preparing to inherit from someone he had not loved in years." Jack wrote back with one sentence. "You may attend the reading of my will when the time comes." My father interpreted that invitation exactly as Jack knew he would. Jack died on a Monday morning while I sat beside him. There was no dramatic final speech. His breathing slowed, and his hand became still inside mine. The night before, he asked me to bring him the cut canvas piece from Negative Space. He studied it and said, "You spent years painting the place where they removed you. Promise your next work will be about the place you built." I promised. Grief arrived disguised as phone calls, signatures, funeral arrangements, passwords, and people suddenly claiming they had been close to him. My father contacted Jack's office less than 48 hours later. He did not call me. He asked when the will would be read and whether beneficiaries had to attend. The estate attorney, Evelyn Morrison, had worked with Jack for nearly 20 years. At our first meeting, she placed 2 sealed folders on the table. The first contained the will and trust documents. The second held a statement Jack had ordered her to reveal only if my father contested the will, threatened me, or lied about their business history during the reading. He hoped we wouldn't need it, she said, but he expected we might. I asked what was inside. Evelyn said Jack wanted me to hear it with everyone else so no one could claim I had rehearsed or manipulated the disclosure. The estate was far larger than I knew. Jack owned commercial buildings, apartment complexes, development land, investments, and controlling interests in several companies. After charitable commitments, employee trusts, the remaining estate was worth just over $48 million. Jack named me sole beneficiary of the majority interest, but the structure was not a simple cash transfer. Some assets would permanently fund Open Door. Employees would receive shares. Several properties would enter an affordable housing trust. I would inherit wealth, but also responsibility, and relatives would not be able to pressure me into liquidating everything. My father arrived in Miami with a different understanding. He had told relatives that Jack privately promised to restore his share of the family company. He told Alan they would receive at least $15 million. They had already begun spending against that expectation. My parents refinanced their house again. Alan guaranteed business loans using a projected inheritance letter prepared by an unlicensed advisor. He leased a luxury office, hired staff, and announced a development project with no real funding. They had not simply hoped for Jack's money. They had built a collapsing financial structure around it. The night before the reading, my mother texted from an unfamiliar number. Tomorrow does not have to become ugly. Your father is willing to welcome you back if you behave respectfully and recognize that your uncle's wealth came from the Turner family. 14 years without asking whether I was alive. And now they offered to welcome me back in exchange for obedience and money. I did not reply. 10 minutes later, Alan wrote, "Dad says Jack probably put assets in your name for tax reasons. Don't panic. We'll handle everything." Their arrogance was so complete that it almost calmed me. They still believed I was 17 and waiting for permission to belong. Before entering the conference room, I pressed my palm against Jack's old sketchbook. On the final page, he had written, "Justice is not making cruel people suffer for entertainment. Justice is removing their ability to keep harming you." I repeated those words. I was not there to scream or humiliate them. I was there to make sure they could never turn Jack's death into another tool of control. When I entered, my father looked me over as though evaluating an employee. My mother wore black and held a handkerchief, though I never saw tears touch it. Alan carried 2 financial binders and placed them on the table with confidence. My father did not greet me. He asked Evelyn how long the reading would take because he had a meeting with bankers that afternoon. Evelyn glanced at the second folder, then at me. That depends entirely on how everyone conducts themselves. Evelyn began with charitable gifts, employee trusts, and instructions regarding Jack's medical foundation. My father shifted impatiently whenever she mentioned money going outside the family. Alan entered figures into a calculator. My mother leaned toward me and whispered, "Your uncle was generous, but he sometimes let emotions interfere with judgment." I ignored her. Evelyn described several apartment buildings being transferred into a non-profit housing trust. My father interrupted. "Those properties were built with Turner family capital. He can't give them away." Evelyn reminded him that Jack had been the sole legal owner for more than 25 years. My father said legal ownership was not moral ownership. That was the first time Evelyn touched the second folder. She continued. Longtime employees received shares in 3 companies. Open Door received an $8 million endowment. A conservation group received coastal land. Then Evelyn reached the residuary estate. After satisfaction of all charitable gifts, employee distributions, taxes, and administrative obligations, I leave all remaining assets, controlling interests, real property, personal effects, and investment holdings to my niece, Natalie Turner, through the Natalie Turner Stewardship Trust. No one moved. My father stared at her. Alan stopped tapping his calculator. My mother dropped her handkerchief. "Read it again." My father demanded. Evelyn did. His chair scraped backward. "That's impossible. Jack told me to attend because I was included." Evelyn replied. "Mr. Turner instructed that you be invited. He did not say you were a beneficiary." Alan opened a binder. There must be another trust. Dad was his business partner. "I have correspondence showing family ownership." Evelyn asked whether he meant correspondence from before David surrendered his shares under a settlement agreement. Alan's expression changed. He had never known about it. My father ordered him to close the binder. Then David looked at me. "You knew I said I knew Jack had created a plan. Not every detail. You sat there and let us make arrangements," he accused. I almost laughed. "We haven't spoken in 14 years. What arrangements was I supposed to warn you about?" He said I had a duty to notify family before they made financial decisions. I asked whether he had felt a duty to notify his 17-year-old daughter before forging her signature and taking her education money. The room went quiet. My mother whispered that the past was being distorted. I looked at her. "You called me after I was thrown out. You didn't ask whether I was safe. You asked where the forged document was." She lowered her eyes. Alan said childhood grievances were irrelevant. According to him, Jack's companies belonged with people capable of operating them. Not an artist who ran a charity. He offered a solution. I could keep a reasonable amount and transfer control of the companies to him and our father. I asked how many companies he currently owned. He said that was irrelevant. Evelyn answered for him. Alan's Restaurant Corporation had dissolved with unpaid payroll taxes. His fitness franchise was under fraud review. His newest development company had no completed projects and more than $3 million in debt. Alan stared at her. How do you know that Evelyn explained that Jack required a risk assessment of anyone likely to pressure me after his death? Most information came from public records and loan documents Alan had circulated while claiming he would control Jack's estate. One banker had contacted Jack's company for verification. Alan snorts, asked whether the bank now knew he was not inheriting. Evelyn said all relevant institutions had been formally notified that morning. My father slammed his hand on the table. You had no authority to sabotage my son. I stood. Your son sabotaged himself. He borrowed money against an inheritance he was never promised. David pointed at me and said I had always been jealous of Alan. The accusation was exactly the same as 14 years earlier. For a moment, I felt the old need to defend myself. Then I remembered Jack's note. I wasn't jealous of Alan. I said I was terrified of becoming him. He was taught that every consequence could be transferred to someone else. When his restaurant failed, you mortgaged the house. When he wrecked a car, Mom sold jewelry. When he wanted another degree, you tried to steal my education fund. Now he borrowed millions because you convinced him a dead man owed him a future. You didn't help him. You trained him to collapse the first time someone said no. Alan called me an ungrateful parasite who had lived off Jack. I explained that I repaid Jack's studio investment, built a foundation with audited accounts, and never claimed money belonging to someone else. Then I opened my folder and placed copies of the scholarship letter, forged withdrawal form, my father's final text, and the agreement protecting my education account on the table. This is what you called family sacrifice, I said. My future, my signature, my home, and my silence. My mother began crying. She said they had been under financial pressure and made mistakes. She insisted no parent handled every situation perfectly. I asked whether throwing a minor into the rain was an imperfect choice or deliberate punishment. She said she wanted to call me back, but my father refused. I asked why she obeyed him for 14 years. I was afraid of losing my marriage. She said, "So, you chose to lose your daughter." She reached across the table, but I moved my hand. My father told her to stop apologizing. Then he declared that Jack had been sick, dependent, and manipulated by me. Evelyn asked whether he was formally alleging undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. He said yes. Alan agreed. My mother hesitated, then nodded after my father glared at her. Evelyn drew the second sealed folder toward her. Mr. Turner anticipated that possibility. She removed a signed statement, a digital recorder, and certified documents. Jack had completed independent medical evaluations confirming full cognitive capacity. The estate documents had been executed with 2 attorneys and a forensic psychiatrist present. The will also contained a contest clause. Any relative who challenged it through false allegations would forfeit every conditional benefit Jack had reserved for them. My father laughed. What benefits? You said he left us nothing, Evelyn replied. Not exactly. Jack had created a debt relief trust capable of paying the remaining mortgage on my parents' home, certain medical expenses, and verified debts not connected to fraud or speculative ventures. It would not give them cash, but could keep them housed and stable. Alan was eligible for funded rehabilitation, financial counseling, and a modest employment stipend if he completed the program and cooperated with creditors. Hope returned briefly to my mother's face. Then Evelyn continued. The benefits were conditional on three things. They could not dishonestly contest the will, claim ownership of Jack's companies, or contact me for money. My father had already made public ownership claims and now alleged incapacity without evidence. Alan had used a projected inheritance to secure financing. Their conduct would be reviewed. But the forfeit clauses appeared to have been triggered. My mother turned toward my father. "You said contesting was just a formality." He told her to be quiet. Evelyn activated the recorder. Jack's voice filled the room. "David, if you are hearing this, then you responded to my death exactly as I feared. You came looking for ownership instead of truth. I invited you because part of me hoped age had changed you. I left safeguards because experience told me it had not." My father's face went gray. Jack explained that he had preserved evidence of the forged education withdrawal, the settlement ending David's role in the company, and every financial rescue he had quietly arranged. He listed property taxes, medical expenses, employee wages, and debts totaling more than $2 million. "I did not steal your future," Jack said. "I repeatedly protected you from the consequences of choices you refused to own. I stopped when I understood that every rescue created another victim." Then he spoke about me. "Natalie did not manipulate me. She asked me not to retaliate against you. She declined criminal charges when she had every right to pursue them. She built a life creating opportunities for young people facing the same financial abuse she survived. I leave her control of my estate because she understands that resources create responsibility, not entitlement." The recording paused. Then Jack said the sentence that destroyed my father's composure. "David, 14 years ago, you told a child that boarding a plane would make her no longer your daughter. You believed disowning her removed your obligations while preserving your authority. It did not. It removed your place in the life she built without you." My father jumped up, knocking over his chair. He shouted that the recording was cruel and staged. He demanded, "Evelyn, turn it off." "No," I said. "You came expecting to hear what Jack left you. Now you're going to hear why he didn't." Jack's final instructions concerned the family home. My parents believed they owned it. But years of refinancing and unpaid taxes had placed it near foreclosure. A holding company controlled by Jack had purchased the senior debt to prevent an immediate sale, under the Debt Relief Trust. My parents could have remained in the house for life while making affordable payments, because of the contest clause. That protection could now be withdrawn. Jack had not planned to make them homeless. Their own actions had placed the house at risk. My mother stared at David. "You said the house was safe." Alan flipped through his binder with trembling hands. His loans contained cross-default provisions, without the inheritance or the house's support. Lenders could demand immediate repayment. He asked Evelyn whether they could reverse what they had said. She answered that legal statements did not disappear because their consequences became inconvenient. Alan turned to me. "Natalie, tell them you don't consider this a challenge. Say we were emotional." It was the first time he had said my name without contempt. He still did not apologize for the scholarship or for watching me leave. He wanted me to rescue him. I looked at the brother my parents had sacrificed everything to protect and understood how trapped he was. He had never learned how to survive an honest consequence. "I was emotional at 17, I said. "You still let the door close." Alan accused me of wanting to destroy him. I replied, "I didn't take your loans, forge your projections, or promise you Jack's companies. You are not losing your future because I refused to save you. You are meeting the future you financed yourself." My father moved toward the documents, but security entered before he reached the table. Evelyn had pressed an alert button when he overturned his chair. 2 guards stepped between us. For my entire childhood, his anger had controlled every room. Now it was only behavior with consequences. He looked at me. "After everything we gave you, You're going to let strangers throw your father out, I said. You disowned me. Remember, you made sure I understood I had no father. My mother asked to speak with me alone, I said. Not that day. She asked whether there would ever be another. I told her the answer depended on whether she wanted a relationship or access to my inheritance. She had no answer. Alan left first, speaking rapidly into his phone as lenders began calling. My father followed under security escort, still insisting the estate belonged to him. My mother remained seated for a moment, then picked up her handkerchief and walked out. The room remained silent. Evelyn switched off the recorder and gave me an envelope bearing my name. Inside was a short note from Jack. You did not win because they lost. You won when their choices stopped deciding who you believed yourself to be. For the first time that morning, I cried. The consequences came quickly. Alan's largest lender froze his development account after learning the inheritance did not exist. 2 investors sued him for misrepresentation. His company closed within a month, leaving several employees without final paychecks. Through Open Doors legal network, I anonymously funded assistance for those workers. Not Alan, but the people harmed by his promises. He eventually entered court-supervised debt restructuring, whether he changed or simply had no choice. I could not say. My parents' situation was more complicated. The trustees determined that my father had knowingly triggered the contest clause, but they did not force an immediate sale of the home. My mother receives 6 months to separate her finances, find housing, or negotiate an affordable lease independently of my father. She filed for legal separation 3 months later. In a letter, she admitted that she had spent decades calling obedience keeping the family together. She did not ask for money. She apologized without explaining away what she had done. I did not forgive her immediately or invite her back. I answered with one sentence. Accountability is the first honest thing you have offered me. It was not reconciliation. It was a door left unlocked but unopened. My father rejected every opportunity to accept responsibility. He challenged the trustees, lost and accumulated legal fees he could not pay. The house was eventually sold. After debts and taxes were satisfied, little remained. Relatives who had repeated his version of family history began distancing themselves when Jack's records became public in the court proceedings. The humiliation he feared most did not come from me exposing him. It came from documents proving that the successful life he claimed Jack had stolen had actually been supported by Jack for years. He sent one final message from another number. You have made your point. A decent daughter would help her father before it is too late. I read it without shaking, then blocked the number. He still believed decency meant protecting him from consequences. I no longer needed him to understand the difference. I spent the next year learning how to carry an inheritance without letting it carry me. Jack's employees kept their positions and received meaningful ownership. Open Door expanded into 4 states, offering art scholarships, emergency housing referrals, financial literacy classes, and legal support for young people whose guardians misused educational funds. We created the Jack Turner Fellowship for students told their ambitions were selfish. The first recipient was a 17-year-old photographer whose parents tried to take her scholarship refund to pay her brother's gambling debt. When I handed her the award, I saw the girl I had once been, but also something I had not understood then. Being abandoned by the wrong people did not mean she would remain alone. I returned to painting. For years, my work had been filled with missing figures, sealed doors, torn paper, and faceless families. My first major piece after Jack's death showed a house with every wall removed. At its center stood a long table surrounded by people who had chosen one another. No one occupied the head. No single person controlled the room. Light entered from every side. I titled it Inheritance. At the gallery opening, someone asked whether the painting meant I had forgiven my family. I told them forgiveness was not the same as restoring access. I could release the need to punish them without pretending they were safe. I could understand my mother's fear without excusing her choices. I could pity Alan without financing his next escape. I could stop hating my father without ever calling him dad again. 14 years earlier, I had walked into the rain believing I had been erased. At the will reading, my father believed money would restore the power he lost when I left. He was wrong about both of us. I had never been erased, and he had never been entitled to control the ending. Jack did not leave me revenge. He left me evidence, protection, responsibility, and the freedom to choose who I would become once no one could force me to remain a victim. The greatest thing I inherited was not $48 million. It was the knowledge that family is not proven by blood, demands, or shared last names. Family is proven by who protects your future when taking it would be easier. So let me ask you this. When someone abandons you, then returns only after you have something they want, do you owe them forgiveness, or do you owe yourself a boundary? Tell me what you would have done in that conference room. I read every comment. Thank you for listening and watching until the end. Everything in this story is fictional and intended only for entertainment and reflection. We hope it reminds you that revenge may give a brief sense of satisfaction, but becoming emotionally free from the people who hurt you can give you something much deeper and more lasting.